Let's dive right in. What is a species? It sounds so simple, but today we're tackling one of biology's oldest, most stubborn puzzles, a mystery that has stumped some of the greatest minds for centuries. So, let's start the investigation.
I mean, it seems like the simplest question in the world, doesn't it? You've got dogs, cats, people. They all seem like these obvious, clear-cut categories. But, and this is the key, the moment you start to really look closer, those clean lines, they start to get really, really blurry.
You see, for most of human history, we had this very neat, tidy idea, the typological view. Think of it like a catalog of fixed types. A lion is a lion because it has some perfect essential lionness to it. Simple. But then, of course, Darwin comes along and just blows that whole idea out of the water. Suddenly, species aren't these fixed, static things anymore. Nope, they're these fluid, dynamic lineages constantly changing, merging, and splitting over millions of years. And their boundaries, they're inherently fuzzy. And that, right there, is where the trouble really starts. So, to get to the bottom of this mystery, biologists have come up with a few major theories, or what they call species concepts. For our purposes, let's treat them like suspects in a detective story. Each one is an attempt to give us one single, clean rule to define a species. Let's line them up and see how they hold up under a little interrogation.
Okay, first up is the phonetic concept. This is the most intuitive one, right? It's the if it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck approach. You just group organisms based on how similar they are on the outside. You know, their shape, structure, all the stuff you can see and measure. Seems pretty straightforward.
Well, yeah, it seems straightforward, but it falls apart pretty quick. The evidence against it just starts piling up. First, you've got sibling species. These are critters that are totally separate genetically, can't interbreed, but they look identical. Total doppelgangers. Then you've got the total opposite, polytypic species. Think about dogs. Poodles and Great Danes are the same species, but they look wildly different. And the real nail in the coffin? Sexual dimorphism. I mean, look at a peacock and a peahen. Based on looks alone, you would never in a million years say they're the same species. So yeah, this suspect story, it's full of holes.
All right, suspect number one didn't pan out. So let's bring in the next one. And this is a big one, the famous biological species concept, or the BSC. This one completely shifts the focus. It says, hey, forget what they look like. What matters is what they do. Specifically, can they breed? So a species is basically a group that can interbreed and have fertile babies. If they can't, they're different species. End of story.
Now, the BSC was a huge deal for a long time, but man, it's got some fatal flaws too. For starters, how do you even test potential interbreeding for animals that live on opposite sides of the planet? It gets pretty vague. And then you have these mind-bending cases called ring species. Picture this, a chain of populations around, say, a mountain range. Each one can breed with its neighbor, until you get to the very ends of the chain where the two final populations meet, and guess what? They can't breed with each other. It's a total paradox. And, maybe the biggest problem of all, this whole concept is completely useless for the vast majority of life on Earth, all the bacteria and other things that reproduce asexually. It just doesn't apply.
Okay, so our second suspect has some serious issues. Let's bring in the final one, the phylogenetic concept. This one takes a totally different tack. It says, forget what they look like now, forget what they do now. The only thing that matters is deep history. A species is just a single, unbranched twig on the massive tree of life. It's the lineage that exists between two splits. It's a really clean, powerful idea, right? But it leads to some pretty weird conclusions. For one, it means that every single time a species splits into two new ones, the original parent species is now technically extinct, gone, even if one of the new branches looks exactly the same. And, just like the BSC, it has a really hard time with bacteria. Their lineages split and swap genes so often that if you followed this rule, you'd end up with like billions and billions of species. It becomes totally impractical.
So let's take a step back. Here's the deal. After interrogating our three main suspects, we've basically hit a dead end. Each concept, grouping by similarity, by reproduction, or by history, tries to give us that one perfect, universal rule. And every single one of them fails when it comes up against the sheer, beautiful messiness of the real living world.
And this is where the investigation takes a really fascinating turn. You know, in any good detective story, when all your prime suspects have a rock-solid alibi, it suggests something really profound. Maybe you're not just chasing the wrong person, maybe you're asking the wrong question from the very beginning. The problem might not be with our definitions, but with the very nature of what we're trying to define. Think about it. We've had generations of brilliant scientists trying to find the one true definition of a species, and they've all come up short. So, what if the problem isn't in their answers? What if the flaw is in the question we've been asking this whole time?
Perhaps the real puzzle isn't about how to group organisms. Maybe the deeper question is about what kind of thing a species truly is. We're moving from a science problem to, well, a metaphysics problem. This is where it gets really interesting.
Okay, so this brings us to a really mind-bending but crucial distinction. Are species an abstract kind? You know, like the element gold? Gold is defined by its properties, 79 protons. Any atom with 79 protons is an instance of gold. Or are species a concrete individual, like the Roman Empire? The Roman Empire was a specific historical thing. It had a beginning, a middle, and an end. It was made of parts, people, cities, roads, all connected through cause and effect. In this second view, an individual lion isn't just an example of the species Panthera leo, it is a literal physical part of it, just like a soldier was a part of the Roman army. That idea, it changes everything.
So where do we go from here? Well, to find the final clue, the one that cracks the case, we have to look at the very structure of life's history. The answer isn't in some neat definition. It's written into the very shape of evolution.
For over a century, we've used this powerful metaphor, the tree of life, this grand branching pattern that connects every living thing back to a common ancestor. And believe it or not, this is exactly where the solution to our mystery has been hiding all along.
There's just one little problem. The tree of life isn't actually a tree. Yeah, that's the twist. As we've learned more and more, especially about the microscopic world, we've realized life isn't just about clean branching. You've got bacteria doing this wild thing called lateral gene transfer, where they just pass chunks of DNA back and forth across totally different branches. It's like an oak tree just handing a gene over to a nearby squirrel. It's crazy. And even more mind-blowing, some of the biggest leaps in evolution, like the origin of our own complex cells with mitochondria, happen through symbiotic fusions, where totally separate ancient lineages literally merge together to become one new thing. So it's not a tree. It's more like a vast, complex, interwoven net.
And this, right here, is the crucial insight. This is the key that unlocks the whole mystery. The structure of life, the rules that connect organisms, are not the same everywhere. They are fundamentally different in different parts of this giant net.
And this quote from the analysis just says it perfectly. Because the underlying genealogical and ecological relationships between organisms differ, we should expect to find different kinds of kinds. In other words, there isn't one single type of category called species, just waiting to be discovered out there in nature.
So let's wrap this case up. What's the final verdict in our investigation? Well, the case is closed. But not because we found the culprit. It's closed because we've reached a completely new understanding of the crime itself. The whole search for a single universal species concept, it was always doomed to fail. Not because biologists weren't smart enough, but because they were looking for a single rule to govern a world that simply isn't built that way. The failure of the investigation was actually its greatest success.
The solution has a name. It's called ontological pluralism. It's a fancy term for a simple, profound idea. There is no single true way to define a species because life itself is structured in different ways in different places. A species of bacteria is just a fundamentally different kind of thing than a species of bird. So a biologist's job isn't to find the one magic ruler, but to use the right ruler for the right part of the web of life.
And that leaves us with one last really fascinating question to think about. As humans, we have this deep-seated need to put everything into neat, clean boxes. But what does it mean if life itself, at its most fundamental level, refuses to be categorized so easily? What does that reveal about our own place in this wonderfully messy, interconnected, and pluralistic web of existence?